36 that we got, because the hot topic of wind solar is in Lee County. Here's your mic. Okay. I'm sure hopefully we'll get more of a response than the 36 just because of that. I want to go through this page by page, really. I know Will did make a mention of identifying if there's a question in there in regards to the size of the project. Is it a community solar, or are you in favor of community solar? Are you in favor of SES? And I think those could be two separate questions in this questionnaire, and I don't believe it's in there right now. So
how are you getting this survey out?
So we have the link. We advertised in the newspaper and let everyone know that there was a link on our webpage. I did send it out to all the county board members and the Farm Bureau to kind of get it out there.
Okay.
We also put out hard copies in 8 locations: West Brooklyn, Pawpaw, Harmon, 2 in Dixon,
Ashton, Franklin.
Amboy, Ashton, and Franklin.
Okay.
We actually got more responses from the hard copy survey than we did from the actual online survey. So it is important that we are getting it out there. So I anticipate doing the same for this project or this survey as well.
Okay.
What did you have in Franklin Grove, Alice?
At the library. It seemed to be a good location. There were several responses there. So,
Good.
and some of the places, I will probably pick different locations.
The bank or the restaurant probably would have more more foot traffic. The restaurant has most foot traffic. If you feel that's a reliable place to put it.
And the key is just getting it out into a place where everyone in the public can access it. It's not necessarily, it's not like we're trying to gain areas of foot traffic, but trying to have a location where people who don't have access to a computer then can go. So those are what we are, that's the goal of the public location.
So I think that will work as we go through. I'm on, let's just get to a question like 8. Everything else is pretty standard, right? Where you live, get you some demographics of what you are in Lee County.
Unfortunately, we don't have a way to keep somebody from padding this, correct?
Well, from a paper copy standpoint, no. But from an online standpoint, yes.
Okay.
So online, if your IP address is.
Right.
Then,
I just clarification is all that, you know.
So I really think like question 9 can be expanded. Whether it be a community solar project. So something like, you believe a solar energy facility, i.e. community solar, call it 100 acres or less near your property will.
You need to break that down
You've got to break it down somehow.
between community. I don't think there's many people that are objective to say a 20 or 30 acre solar field farm versus a 3,000 acre solar farm.
I think and that's what we want to get, the value.
Absolutely. And I think, by trying to make it a
Yep.
catch-all in 9 and actually in the next one too, if I remember right. I don't think you're gonna get a true picture.
But you're gonna have to clarify the definition of those solar farms because we didn't know what they were to start with.
And that's what Will and I had this conversation beforehand, like explaining to the general public of, hey, an SES is larger than
lot of
what a
people
community
don't.
solar. It doesn't work. You can just yell.
Majority of people don't know what an SES is.
I don't think the majority of the county board knows what an SES is. So,
We didn't when we started,
Absolutely.
you know.
Utility size
yeah.
Yes.
compared to community.
And
Right.
what do they consider utility size? Is there an easy definition of that, Chris?
Yeah, I think Will and
Yeah,
can help us.
Scott, you're with Hexagon, and we'll Hexagon also with Hexagon. We're working on
No, I know who you are.
project away. And I think after our conversation, or the last renewable energy committee meeting, we had a conversation with county staff about a huge number of small projects trying to relocate themselves here based on changing state policy. That's going to be, the difference is there's a lot of those, but they're small, they're 20 to 30 acres, whereas or maybe a little bit bigger, maybe 100 acres, something like that. Whereas the projects that we're working on and a few others that we believe, we're developers, so we'll say this, but we believe they can either be really beneficial if they're located in the right place, they're single and quiet, they don't mess with anything, or they can be really detrimental if they're located really close to the town. You can have two different feelings for those two types of projects. So I wasn't trying to, mess up any approach with the survey, but it does seem clear that those operate on different scales, different timelines, and it might be helpful to understand the difference between one and another. Yeah.
Well, I don't have a problem really, any of them at the appropriate place.
Exactly.
But I do know in talking with people, and I travel a lot, I see a lot of the little projects. They blend in. I mean, you drive another half a mile, you don't even know what's behind the little residential project. Right? The big ones, there's some up there on Stagecoach Trail that are pretty good size. And people love them or hate them. I don't see there's not too much in between, just like the wind towers.
And our whole, this whole process is to help the county, we want to safeguard the project that we think is on site and for the rural, but we also want to help the county make sure that those are not appropriately sited, as we said, but where people want them. You can't just steamroll and say, we're going to surround the town and fix them with a massive solar project. That's not going to work for anybody very well. So it might be helpful, we wouldn't want to preclude somebody from if they wanted to put a 20-acre project half a mile outside of the city limits of the city like that, great. There's just nuance, and that's really hard to get out with the survey, so we're not happy to help provide commentary, but there's big differences in how those are handled. Sure.
Do you have some ideas, Alice, on how you can, or at least?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Gordy.
Yeah, my name is Gordy Simonton, and I have a company in Minneapolis, Solarstone Partners, and I couldn't hear the gentleman in the back, but just for transparency, we have a project close to Woosung in Lee County that we're looking to get re-permitted. So that's my interest in following along here with your minutes and so forth and where you're at with this moratorium. But I think, and I can certainly appreciate that question of trying to make a distinction and keep it simple for the general populace. But my recommendation would be is that I think you need to keep it in reference to what they're familiar with. And so currently right now, a community solar facility can't be any bigger than 2 megawatts based on what the IPA rules require. And that's somewhere between 15 to 20 acres. So when I'm talking to people about it and I'm in a public forum, that's what I use to give them that reference point of it's about 15 to 20 acres. Anything larger than that, more acres than that, I would tell you for the purposes of the general populace that it's going to be probably a utility scale project. So I try to keep a real bright line there and just keep it simple for them. But I think the best way to define it for them is to keep it on an acreage basis and not get them confused with megawatts and so forth, because most don't have a concept of what that understanding is.
What is your project by Woosung commercial or a residential project?
It's a community solar project. It would be, we'd have subscribers on it. We have 2 projects already that we put online last year, one in Sandoval, Illinois, and the other one is in Rockford. So, but they're, we have to get interconnection agreements with both Ameren and ComEd. And then once we've built and constructed those, then, residential, business, academia, governmental entities can all participate on and subscribe to that facility.
Gordy, my name is Scott Reamer. I'm another solar developer I'm with Hexagon Energy, and we're working on as you mentioned, a utility scale project. We do the distributed generation size as well. And so I was just commenting on it may be helpful in the survey to distinguish between the two. And one way that could be handled that just came to me, we already have this broken into 3 sections of solar, battery storage, and wind. Maybe we could you could change it so that it's small scale solar or utility, distributed generation, community solar. That could be one, and just define that's a project less than 50 acres. A project more than 50 acres could be the next one. It's just a thought that I've seen it handled that way in some other places. If that's easier than trying to, within the one piece, trying to finagle, okay, this is this size, this is that size.
Right.
It may be easier to just add a different section for it.
Take your question or your comments further. He just mentioned that a 2 meg project
Right.
normally takes in no more than about 20 acres, 15 to 20 acres. And I understand there's flexibility here.
Yeah.
But
That's about right.
you're talking 50 acres. Should we scale it back to 20 acres, or 25 acres? Or
The only reason I said 50 was because sometimes policies change and they might allow a project up to 5 megawatts, and industry standard, again, 10 acres per megawatt is a rule of thumb, a generous rule of thumb.
But a community project is no more than 2 meg at this point.
Depending on where you're at in the country, it can go up to 5 meg, and it's usually what I see.
I think
But two is fine.
the gentleman's comments are accurate, but my understanding is that this survey is going out to Lee County residents.
So I think 20 acres is probably appropriate.
Yeah.
And then how we develop those questions. And I do like your point of whether we have a separate section of community solar, utility solar, wind, battery storage.
And we need to define that.
And we have to
Because-
define that.
Not to take anything away from any resident of Lee County, but you always want to break your questionnaire down to the lowest common denominator, because people lack the knowledge. It's not they're stupid, it's just that they lack the knowledge of some of the terminology. It's just like we said, who knows what an SES project is, you know?
Yep.
So we have Stephanie Brown with Chastain present.
Hi, Stephanie.
So following this meeting, her and I are gonna get together and discuss these suggestions and how we can incorporate.
You believe it's pretty easy to incorporate this conversation into the questionnaire?
Yes, I'm already
Perfect.
doing it in live time, so.
Hi, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Just came up the light side there.
Okay, appreciate that, Stephanie.
You're most welcome.
So moving on, I think all the questions work really well. So I'm on question 10 right now. Anybody got anything, problems with that page?
There again, I think it depends on size, if we can change.
Yeah, but I think we will. And I think the same questions that go to those questions will be for both, whether a 20 acre
Yeah.
minus or 20 acre plus. Stephanie's got it all figured out. She's the brains of the operation.
Chris, one thing I want to bring up and what Scott was referencing, and I just double checked it. The IPA and Illinois Power Agency just revised their community solar guidelines for the adjustable block program November 12th, 2021 to have a nameplate capacity max at 5,000 kilowatts. That's why the 50 acre discussion is coming into play, because the state of Illinois has actually expanded their definition to allow for a 5 megawatt community solar project versus a 2 megawatt. It sounds like the project that Gordy is attempting to re-permit would be a legacy adjustable block program project falling into the 2 megawatt category. Hexagon has some of those that are peppered around the state, but Illinois is now allowing for larger 5 megawatt community solar projects to be developed, not allowing for co-location of those sites, but a 5,000 kilowatt maximum allowance. So that's where Scott was
That's what I
talking
was
about, that
pulling
50 acre.
Definition then of a
So
community.
I got an idea.
Yeah, so now it's at 50 acres roughly. So that was just something I wanted to double check before saying, but it was passed as part of the Future Energy Jobs Act.
So Stephanie, why don't we have a question in there in regards to, do you support 20 acre or less solar? Do you support 20 to 50 acre solar projects? Do you support 50 acres and more solar? Something, or all of the above? I think that would give us a clarification of 20 acres or less, the bigger community solars, and then the SES projects.
Because you still can't build.
Absolutely.
that New program, a 2-megawatt project.
Right.
We're not trying to quibble. We just want to be clear with where.
But I would be interested in why the state raised it to 5. Is it financial viability of the project, or is it personal preference?
Why
of the
aren't you
people?
logged in through the app?
I think it certainly helps the
I
project.
was logged in, it
economics,
just backed out.
For the program as a whole, because they're
Gotta make
not
money.
paying all the
Gotta make
rents.
Hit them square.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they're not paying the full rent value up front.
Okay.
For these projects, they're actually paying it over a 15-year period now.
Click.
So the economics have changed slightly. The overall revenue credit value is declining. So I think they're trying to get some economies of scale as they're available. And if a project can go up to 5 megawatts, they want to.
What the hell?
And it's also just, we live in a culture, right? And the culture across the US, usually community solar projects are either 2 megawatts or 5 megawatts. And you see that in the Northeast, you see it all over the place, that it sort of goes between those two. So
There's areas where 20 acres
Yeah.
is perfectly acceptable, and there's others where 50 is acceptable.
Right,
I mean, and from the visibility.
and hopefully very few of them where 6,000 acres are acceptable.
Gordy, I want to know, is that acceptable for you if we kind of have outlined in the survey of 20 acres or less, 20 to 50, and then 50 and greater? Do you think that would be a valuable idea?
You know, I understand that you guys are dealing with some different variables here, but just to add, I don't have a problem with that, but I just want to add a little bit more context to what you were being provided there with the 5 megawatt facilities. That is accurate, but that's a different program. That is a density community solar program for 5 megawatts. There's a scoring system that you have to have in order to submit in for 5 megawatts. And almost all of those are around large metropolitan areas. That program was put in place by the IPA because the first go around with the community solar, most of it was being done almost exclusively in rural areas. So the IPA came back and recalibrated and decided that they wanted to give developers incentive to be around more densely populated areas and provide that incentive. So that program does exist, but I haven't looked at Lee County, but I'm guessing that there's maybe 1 city, maybe 2 that would qualify. And I can get that to you. I don't want to hold it up here, and maybe it's not even relevant at this point because I think sounds like you all are trying to get this survey out. But I'm just going to add a little more context to it. That is a little different program than the 2 megawatt, which is more focused on rural, which I think is where you all are trying to get where you've probably been getting some objections and where you're trying to resolve some of these conflicts that you're having.
I think we're trying to throw everything on the table and get as much information as we can. It feels like we're drinking out of a fire hose when it comes to solar and wind right now. And that's a good thing. And that's why we have this committee. And that's why we currently have a moratorium so we can drink through the fire hose. And so I think we're more than happy to have that information. And to your point, it's probably Amboy and Dixon that would qualify for 5 megawatt projects. And whether they go in or not, I know the Park District wants to put in a 27 acre project. So, and everybody supports the 27 acre project because it's going to bring an additional $40,000 of revenue into the Dixon Park District, but that's greater than 20 acres. So it's finding that happy question as we go.
Okay, thank you.
So, but yeah, if you've got any information that you wish to share, we are always interested in it. Just send it to Alice and Dee, and they'll coordinate it out to the committee. So we're always looking for more information.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions on solar? You guys good? Moving on to wind.
Say, could I just ask one more thing? Just as long as I didn't realize you were segmenting this. I had heard or read in the minutes and watched the last meeting, And there was some discussion about making a recommendation to the board about extending the moratorium for 3 to 6 months. And I was just curious if that recommendation has been submitted to the board, county board, and what the status is of that.
It has not been submitted yet. We're really gonna see how fast we get the results back, how fast we can move this ordinance on to planning to have a hearing. And I just got the look from Alice from our zoning department that said, we need to have a conversation about that. So
Okay.
before I get too far along,
I think you just need to keep in mind the county board schedule and when the moratoriums expire.
Yep. So it may have to be extended a little bit. I do know that you guys are under a time frame for these community solars of, I believe, November, that you have to be through the ZBA hearings by November. Is that correct, Gordy?
I think, I mean, obviously, in our situation here, there are projects that we have. There's actually, well, Woonsong is one of them. We've got 6 total that we are looking to get shovel ready in 2022. So, I'm trying to ascertain here, when this moratorium comes off so that we can put our applications in. So I'm not really looking at November as a deadline for us. I'm looking at, how quickly we can move forward here and get this re-permitting process in place and under the new solar ordinance.
Okay, that'll work. We'll move as fast as we can and get the results back and try to get something done. That's all I can
Great.
promise.
Appreciate it. Thank
Yep,
you.
no problem. Wind energy, do you guys have any comments, questions as far as the survey goes? I'm looking back there to you guys, and you're not gonna put up one tower. We're not gonna have another atom in the county. So I don't think we have to define large solar project or wind projects versus small.
Hi, everybody. My name is Courtney Kennedy. I'm here as local counsel for Renewable. Just looking at some of the survey questions, the company has suggested, possibly holding like a town hall meeting or several town hall meetings. A lot of these questions get a little technical, and in my opinion, you can interpret the answers about 5 different ways when you look at the results of how people are answering. So I think just educating people on what some of these terms are, or what, addressing some of their concerns so they can answer. And then maybe also just having a general comment section that they could submit so the county can get a deeper understanding of where they're coming from or what their concerns are.
I don't think a comment section would be all that bad.
There is one at the very end.
There is one at the very end. There we go. The reason why we don't want to do the community hearing is, I know what a community hearing is going to turn into, right? It's going to turn into a giant it fest. And that's the whole reason for the survey. That I think we're still going to go through planning so people can still voice their problems and concerns there. And we've said all along, you be a part of it since the very beginning, Courtney, is the people who want to make the difference are the ones that are in this room. If you want to be here and you want to see changes, come join us. It's not like we're hard to get along with.
Courtney, about town halls, the zoning office encourages those. If we know wants to set something up in the community and educate people, we are all for that because people do have questions. And it does give them the opportunity to come straight to the source and find out what exactly is going on. So
I think we could work together and have the zoning office there, with the surveys even, and also just to listen and hearing what we have to say. Another concern that I have, and I know I spoke to you previously about this, Alice, is just when these surveys are submitted, how do we know that one individual isn't sitting at home filling out 30 surveys? So is there a way that we can check, to make sure that there's not multiple surveys? Because I think that there's an easy way.
So to the point, IP addresses are being tracked. So I think, Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong, but if they're 2 and they're very different, then it might be, I filled it out and my wife filled it out. And trust me, my wife and I have very different opinions on renewable energy in Lee County. But if I filled it out and I filled it out 10 times and they're all exactly the same and say, I hate solar and I hate wind and by God, farm ground's the greatest thing ever, then we're only going to take it as a grain of salt with one. And once again, this is just for reference. I think to the point of, we didn't learn that it's not no on pipeline, it's the safety of pipeline. And it all goes back to what happened 4, 5, 6 years ago, right? So we all understand that for who lived in the community, but it's not, hey, we don't want another pipeline. This is beneficial, but we do have concerns. And I think that's what we're going to learn from wind and solar. But yes, to the point, I think holding town hall meetings, into town hall meetings, nobody ever shows up for town hall meetings. So that's other than the person who wants to just complain. So I get it, but.
Sure. Is there a mechanism to check the physical surveys? So the ones that you have out in different locations? I mean, to check to make sure, even if the answer is slightly different, you know, you could have any individual modify your answer.
That's my concern. That's what I was saying earlier, is that, you know,
That's what, I mean, from my perspective, and take this for what it's worth, but a public hearing is almost preferable because the person has to show up, you see who's there testifying, but I certainly understand, you know, how convenient a survey is. I just want to be careful about how we interpret results.
So these are all the survey results. They are public. The public does have access to them, so anyone is welcome to come and review them.
Sure.
I have been the one that has inputted the answers, and I have not come across anything that made me think that someone had filled out multiple surveys. Everyone kind of seems to have different little things that they do that make it obvious that somebody different has filled it out. So
Sure.
I don't think we've run into that, but Dee and I are discussing ways of maybe preventing that from the next survey.
Alice, when you categorized where they were from, what town, what area, you just went from the location they were picked up at?
No, there's actually a question.
There's a
in the
question on the survey.
Oh,
So if you were down at Amboy,
okay.
Whoever's filling it out, they fill out where they live and
Okay, that's fine.
so.
Didn't catch that.
Stephanie, you got something looks like to add? No. Oh, okay. You just popped up big on our screen, so I figured you were gonna talk.
Someone else jumped off, which made me bigger apparently.
Okay. So I get it that I'm able to go for 14 days in 8 different locations across Lee County without having to have public hearing where nobody shows up. It's easy for somebody at the Harmon Bar or the library in Franklin to pick one up and say, you know what, these are the 3 concerns that I have, and then drop it back in the box. So it's which one's right? Like we weighed a lot of different options here, right?
Sure.
The problem I've had with public meetings is it's hard to find a moderator that people consider neutral. And this would be something that would be very important in this, because people have seemed to have drawn this way or this way when it comes to the alternative energies. They either like them or they don't. And you need to get somebody who I think they feel is neutral on the issue and asks the questions from a neutral standpoint, or answers the questions from a neutral standpoint.
So I think there's a little bit of confusion. A town hall is not a hearing process. That is when the company is going to set up like a display
Right.
where they.
Q&A, a
the
Q&A
public can
session,
come and,
I understand
get
that.
information.
And
So then when we get to, we'll have the public hearing before the zoning board of appeals on any ordinance changes. And that is when the public then can come and testify as to what their issues are with it.
but I guess what I'm getting at is if you have a show and tell and virtually everybody here who is interested in getting this stuff in place, they're not going to cast it in a negative light. That would be foolish. So you don't have a point council. That's what I would say. A lot of people would like to see, what's the good stuff, what's the bad stuff.
The way that I would envision the town hall would be the same way that South Dixon Solar hosted its community meeting. So you might remember they brought, all the experts, or almost every expert that they brought to the ZBA here to testify, set them up, we had handouts. and people were free to engage, talk one-on-one with these individuals, ask their questions. So that would probably be the same way that I would try to host the town
And how many
hall.
people showed up?
There was 40 people.
Oh, really?
total.
Okay, shocking.
And we had a sign-in sheet.
Yeah, yeah.
Checking in.
Where would you hold this town hall?
I would try to see if we could do it at a community building, or even if we could rent out this room, even like we did back then. And we had it like an open house, we were worried about COVID regulations, so we had it from like 5 to 8, I wanna say, so people could feel free to come and go as they pleased.
Would like to see it in the areas where they're planning, so
Yeah.
that we're getting there.
Yeah, the NIMBY thing
I
would
can
be
do
very
one.
important,
I do want to.
if I was to comment on solar. or wind.
I'm certainly not opposed to questionnaires, but I earlier share Courtney's concern. And as we sat through doing an ordinance for solar sometime months ago,
They're not working.
I don't believe for 1 minute that we wouldn't have somebody go out and pick up 50 surveys, paper ones, and fill them out. And jade where we're at, just because of the issues we've seen.
Well, but with that being said, as I started it, this is a grain of salt. This is.
That's why I say I'm not opposed to survey. I'm just, I think we should do both, the community meetings and the surveys, but
Really, the questions that Stephanie has put together, I feel highlight what the concerns are of the public, so I see it more as a tool than I guess as something that's going to make the county change their stance.
I'm only playing devil's advocate. I don't disagree with you.
Okay.
So how about this? We do the survey and our anticipation is, call it Monday of next week is what we want to just say. We're gonna leave it out for 2 weeks. That gets us to the mid to end of May. By the time we get the results back, if we feel like it's just completely off the wall, would you guys as developers more than apt to have a town hall meeting, whether here in Dixon, South Dixon, Harmon, wherever we decide for the entire public? I think if we could help put something together to educate people even more without the overhanging of a South Dixon or a Bison Meadows or anything like that, a hexagon project. This is strictly for information for the residents of Lee County. Would you guys be okay with that after we get the results back, if we decide that that's what we need to go with?
I guess I just wonder, what is your defining line between like what the results look like and if there's a meeting needed?
So if I get the same results that I got here, that, hey, yeah, I got 36 results and it's very clear that we don't feel like we had people lying. We don't feel like it's an election.
The results vary appropriately enough that I feel we got like it's a very
good
small
cross-section.
snapshot, but an inaccurate snapshot of where people are at with the issue. So I'm hoping to obtain the same thing from the next survey, but we're gonna have to see the results.
And with you guys who is developers in the room, we'll show it to you and say, God, we don't like this. We do think we need to have a community engagement, and we'll listen to you, right? Like, you're the ones who are here helping us build this ship. That if you look at it and go, yeah, there's no reason to have a project or a community hearing or town hall hearing, then let's not do it.
I feel like that's already biased though, because if it doesn't reflect the results that you wanted to have, then you feel like you need to have the meeting. All should not be focused on Bison Meadows or Hexagon or anything, but generally just before we send off the survey, make sure people know what they're being asked about. Because I think you had mentioned you've had a lot of solar projects come through and get permitted, but you haven't seen one yet in the community. So before asking people to answer questions on a survey or on solar or wind, let's make sure we're all on this, like they understand what they're being asked, so that when they answer the survey the first time, they're reflecting their concerns based on accurate information and not information that could be received from the way questions are written or from thoughts that they've heard and not things that they've actually witnessed or learned accurately.
So do you think that could be something that we can address on the first page of the survey?
Yeah, I've started adding, sorry, I'm gonna assume that was directed at me.
Yes, it was.
Okay. I've started adding more definitions at the top explaining, and I can add photos. so you can get a sense of scale as well, especially looking at, I was looking for the solar farms. I don't, until I married a farmer, I had no idea the difference between 20 and 30 acres. So I think that could be helpful too, to pull some representative images in as an educational tool.
Scale is only on wind towers, because that's what people have seen on solar farms. You say it's gonna be 6,300 acre solar farm or whatever. I mean, I'm an old farm kid. I can relate to 6,300 acres, but maybe Tom can't.
Speak up so they can see the recording.
Yeah, maybe Tom can't relate to 6,300 acres. So the majority of people that live in Dixon probably can't relate to 6,300 acres. That's a lot of land,
I think just about,
but that's a good spot for them.
I think especially now and maybe even other wind farms that are already permitted and built and in the county, if you gave them an opportunity to come to a meeting spot, you say, hey, we're gonna disseminate surveys or post them on such and such date, let's hold a meeting prior to that. Anybody can come, you can educate them on what they're going to be asked. I think everybody would show up to that meeting and try to educate the public.
Are we worried though? I understand what you want, like, I get it, that we should have, call it 10 days from today, so we could publicize it, get it out to the community that, hey, we're gonna have a community, renewable energy meeting, town hall hearing here in the courthouse, right? And then afterwards, we'll have surveys. That's when we'll post the surveys for people to fill out. My concern is we are currently under the moratorium, right? And nobody likes it. It's, you guys want to see us move faster, but we also want to move correctly. So it's a balancing act of moving as fast as we can, but still doing it under control. And so that's what's the happy medium there. Because like I hear from Gordy, who's like, God, I wish the moratorium was lifted yesterday.
My other question, I guess, is what is the purpose of each question in regard to what that means for the ordinance itself? And I think that's too much to go into detail right now, but I think as a committee, each question, and as the consulting group, each question has to have a direct impact to how you see this affecting the ordinance. And if it's not going to affect the ordinance, what's the purpose of the question? What are you trying to get across? What are you trying to learn? And
Right.
I just want to, I would want to know that the way these questions are being answered are based on information that's true and perceptions that are accurate within each members of the community. So making sure, only one person is answering a survey and making sure the person who's answering the survey has a good understanding of what wind is or what battery storage is or what solar is, so that you can interpret that in a way that helps build a good ordinance that the county wants to see.
Right. Lots to think about, right, Stephanie?
My understanding, forgive me here if I'm getting anything wrong, is that the way the board is treating this survey is as a tool, as a fact-finding tool, not as this isn't a vote, this isn't a binding, county's going to vote now, we're doing a survey, whatever it says is the new law for solar. This is more, the county wants to understand here, what does the public think? And this is an imperfect tool. Now, I actually do think another imperfect tool is a community meeting. I think both of those give feedback from different angles, and I realize we're dealing with limited time. Everybody has what they can fit into their schedule and what they can't. We're agnostic as to whether or not it's done with the survey community meeting. I see value to both. I think the wheels are turning for the survey, so going with it makes sense, but also just so we're clear as developers, you're not treating this as like, okay, here's a vote, this is what the county said, this is more, what are people saying out there?
Safety.
What can we hear?
I keep going back to this one where safety was their number one concern, like over and over and over again, pipeline safety was their number one concern. We just reiterated what AMA said was required from a pipeline standpoint in our ordinance, which addresses safety. So I can now fulfill what the public told me to do in our ordinance, which makes sense. Now, if the public says, hey, I want to use your project or solar project, I believe that windmills should be 5 times the height away from a property line. Well, that's not practical, right? Like, it's practicality versus But if they're like, I want it to be a far enough a distance away, well, right now we're 3.1 times the height away from a property line. Does that suffice for what they're looking for? And so I think it's trying to give us it's the gold sticker, right? Like, hey, we're doing all this stuff and this is actually what's right. Like we're trying to listen to our constituents, and we have to make some hard decisions of saying, hey, we believe that, no, there shouldn't be any solar or wind in Lee County. And I don't think anybody on the board believes that. Maybe some people do, but I'm not that person. But I think we have to listen to the residents of Lee County, at least give them the opportunity. If they don't like it, put your name on the ballot and vote me out of office. I'm fine with that too. So, but yeah, to your point, I don't know which one's perfect. I think this is the tool that we have moving forward. And if we have to, town hall community meetings are huge.
There would be nothing wrong with us as developers, and I know we did this for Stewart. We held a number of community meetings based on individual villages, and that's where we got a lot of feedback, and we were able to say, look, this community in this particular instance supports this particular project. There's nothing wrong with us as developers even trying to do more of those, right? To say, look, let's have a community meeting and invite you guys out to it. Maybe even in tandem with this survey, but as another imperfect tool that helps gauge public opinion. As we all know, if public opinion were measurable, we wouldn't have interesting elections, but we have very interesting elections in this country. So it's very hard to gauge, but I think more meetings can be helpful if needed. So I'm supportive of it, but also not feeling that it's a dire need, but supportive of the idea of doing more of those.
I think the surveys, Chris, you mentioned that the pipeline survey was more in safety issue. And I agree with it. I mean, if I was, considering what happened here 4 or 5 years ago, and I remember a buddy of mine had a tiling service, hit the gas line that runs from wherever to wherever south of Dixon. And it was gasoline shooting 30, 40 feet in the air because it was a pressurized line. But I think your surveys on wind are going to more questions on visual. I mean, I don't know how many people consider the safety aspects of wind turbines as much as the visual aspects of wind turbines. And solar is probably somewhere in between based on, if they're big or small, and the topography of the land. People live in the south part of the county where it's a little more rolling and smaller community projects. You can't see them a half mile away, but there's issues on the solar panels, the disposal of the solar panels, and so on and so forth. So you're going to get a good different mix of how these surveys come back. And I don't know.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I wanted to address also. Based on the feedback from the survey, there could be potentially an opportunity. This is something where we could address it in a community meeting, something like that, to provide information. For example, if they're concerned about property values, and there's a constant theme there. For Stewart Creek, we commissioned Cut Resnick to perform an analysis on adjacent property value impacts. They showed that there's no negative impacts. So being able to then answer those questions and provide information. If there are concerns about safety, there are a number of reports that show what goes into a solar panel. We help to educate people, because a lot of these questions are based on not being intimately familiar with either solar. And if we can then look at what questions come up and provide and disseminate information to people who are concerned, we're happy to do that, especially those who fill out the surveys. If they perhaps don't want to remain anonymous and would like to be contacted by us, we're happy to come out and meet with those individuals also, whether it's one-on-one or in those community meetings. It's something we did leading up to Stewart Creek, where this months and months in advance to go out and talk with adjacent land, instead of just sending a letter to say, hey, we're going after a permit in 2 weeks. Feel free to show up. We want to answer all their questions ahead of time, because usually when you come to those meetings, you sometimes have your opinion already made up. Right. So we want to see people had concern and answer those ahead of time and make adjustments as needed.
Nice thing about a town meeting is you get the educational factor in there too, because there's an awful lot. I mean, I'm sure some of these questions that we got previously are based on what Aunt Sue or Uncle Joe or Grandpa Bob say about wind farms, solar farms, pipelines, whatever, not so much on the actual facts. I mean, I like the facts.
Right. You can Google and find any answer that you want.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't, you know,
Right.
especially older people aren't as familiar as it could be. I mean, the younger crowd, you know, 40 and down, they're pretty familiar with computers and they hop right to that Google. And,
We don't want to slow things down too badly.
Right
but
down.
I think a community meeting may be helpful, and we're supportive of helping. do
I'm
that.
gonna put Adam on the spot.
Once you
Adam,
learn-
as Farm Bureau, like, you guys do a ton of surveys and you get a lot, like, is it the same way? Use it as a grain of salt. And,
Yeah, it's
and do you think we're going the right direction with this?
you need to get as much public interaction as you can because you are public.
Right,
You know, there's no hiding stuff. Farm Bureau is a membership community. So it's a different ball of wax how it works, but surveys are great. You get an idea. But the problem is if people doing the survey aren't educated, then how is that gonna help the public to become educated?
Right.
But just today we had a discussion on 2 megawatt versus 5 megawatt. Well, no, 5 megawatt was just approved. No, it's gotta be a certain size community to be a 5 megawatt. So we don't,
we're still,
nobody in this room knows what's going on.
Right.
So how are we going to make an ordinance without being properly educated in the first place?
Okay, so does the county then want to coordinate some type of town hall with this survey?
I don't think we have time personally. I think in a perfect world, we would, but with the community solar projects that want to move forward, with the wind projects that want to move forward, with solar projects, SES projects that want to move forward.
we
We've
don't
already
have a
talked,
moratorium on community solar.
what's that?
We don't have,
Yes, we do.
I thought that was them.
Nope, it's on everything.
Community solar isn't defined in our ordinance, so it falls under our SES.
So everything is under moratorium right now, and that's the problem, right, John? Is that, and when we first started this, the community solar people said, hey, we can live with the same ordinance that the SES is after looking at it. So that's, why should we write a separate ordinance for community solar, just to have a separate ordinance that says, and then to have the point, whether it's 20 acres or 50 acres, or we either have residential or it's non-residential, or on-site use.
So the residential ones are the ones that are exempted from the moratorium
Correct, yes.
I agree
terminology.
that I think, that the county should move forward on its own timeline and maybe leave the burden up to the developers and those existing wind farms, solar farms to reach out and set up their own town halls and be open with communication, be receptive to receiving questions.
I think it's something that we should do regardless. We talk about annual meetings, but I think it's something that we can do with the support of developers in Lee County of educating people before there's a problem in place. But I think just with the timeline that we have with moratoriums and everything else, that we should just move forward with the survey, figure out if the results are appropriate, and then go from there. We knew, like, the pipeline, it was starting from scratch. We know with wind and solar that we're modifying some stuff. We know it's not building it from the ground up. So that's the.
So when's your plan to launch this, this?
If you want to move forward, we'd have to open it up this Sunday, the 8th, and let it run for 2 weeks. Which would then put us at.
The 25th, no, the 22nd.
Well, yeah, it would close on the 21st, and then the week of the 22nd, we could possibly reconvene to review those results.
Okay,
And we can get the modifications we want to this by then, by Sunday?
Yes.
Okay,
I'm actually going to speak with Stephanie today.
Okay.
To kind of go through everything.
Okay.
So,
so do we want to make a motion to send this out next week with the changes that we discussed?
changes we discussed for information or for definition. Yeah, I'll make that motion.
John seconds it. All in favor of sending this out next week, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, we'll get that out and we'll definitely include you guys in the conversation. Is there anything else? My two things died like 3 times, so hold on. No, she went over there.
I don't know.
We do not have an update on the MOU. Currently, I spoke to Charlie last Friday and he was gonna get in touch with Matt Keegan, the attorney for the city of Amway, to find out where they're at.
Where they were at. Okay. I have nothing else, gentlemen.
We're going to finish out the agenda,
There's nothing else to talk about.
What's,
just the updates on the ordinances and
for a refresher, what's our date on our moratorium?
I'd have to go.
I have to check, but I know, I believe wind and solar is up in June,
It's coming pretty close, but okay.
so.
Stephanie.
So
What do you need?
I was just curious where we stand. I talked to you yesterday, I believe, about where we stand on the wind and solar ordinances. Have we,
we're just gonna get the results back.
Those haven't began yet. We're still waiting on, we have to get the survey out before we can even start. those.
right, right. So that what I'm getting at is that builds into the moratorium. If you're not planning on extending it, then you got to get the ordinances.
We'll figure out when the moratorium ends. I can't remember if it's June or July. We'll figure out when it ends.
Pretty sure it's June. And that's the thing. By the end of this month, we should kind of know where we're headed with the wind and solar and battery energy storage systems. And be able to determine a more definite timeline for getting ordinance drafts out.
So we're gonna have to extend it. It'll probably go through properties that extended the moratorium. We'll work on that here, figure out if it is July, then we've got a little bit of time, but if it's June, it'll have to be.
I think it's June too,
And
but
the county has no intentions of dragging their feet.
No.
I mean, we're not trying to hold this up. We are trying to keep this going as quickly as possible.
so do we want to schedule a meeting then, late in May?
I would think that it would be beneficial to meet sometime the week of the 22nd to go over the survey results and
Later in the week, probably better to give time to compile the results.
the results, once they're in the computer, it's just a matter of printing a report. So it's
May
Okay.
26th, 9 a.m. How about that?
Like it.
Okay,
May 26th.
yes.
Day of the week,
Thursday,
Thursday.
Let me make sure there's nothing.
9 a.m.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's
Uh,
tentative based off of the survey results coming in. So
Mr. Chairman, prior to our adjourning, I'd like to have you ask if there's any of the guests have any other comments or concerns.
Yep.
We have a lot of people back
does
there.
anybody else have anything, comments, concerns about what we discussed today? I know it was a very in-depth conversation, and I don't know if we're doing the right thing, but we're doing something. That being said, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Stephanie, you can hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, she can.
Tell Kurt Nicholson said hello. You see him? Does he actually work in your
Okay.
office?
No, she's down in Decatur.
Oh, you're in Decatur. Beautiful Decatur. Okay, sorry. I didn't know where you're at. You're up on the screen. I didn't know you were in Decatur.
I'm just an orb. It's fine.
Why are you in Decatur? You have an office in Decatur?
We do.
Ah.
Yep.
Beautiful town of Decatur. I've been there. and don't
John,
wanna
we're
go
still on
back.
YouTube. John, we're still on YouTube. Recorded on YouTube.
I know.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.